December 15th, 2023, Chicago. A night so cold it felt like the wind was scraping its nails across the glass of the city. The kind of cold that makes your breath look like it's trying to leave your body for someplace warmer. I remember that night because everything was supposed to be routine. 3 rides, 2 hours, a quiet shift before sunrise. But routine has a way of tearing open when you're not paying attention, and I wasn't. I'd been dragging myself through that month like a ghost wearing my own clothes. Bills piled up, hours cut, sleep thinning out. Driving felt less like a job and more like a place to hide from the parts of my life I didn't want to face. My first passenger told me something that stuck. Most people out at this hour aren't going somewhere. They're running from something. I didn't know it yet, but I'd spend the rest of that night wishing he hadn't said that. Because the fourth stop, the one that wasn't supposed to exist, didn't feel like a pickup. It felt like a warning. A man standing beside a gas pump, too still for the cold, too calm for the hour. Like he wasn't from here. Like he was watching the world instead of trying to move through it. Something in the way he held himself made the air feel tight around my ribs. And this is where our first story begins. Not with a ride request, but with a place I thought I knew. A routine that should have been safe. And a moment where the darkness felt like it was waiting for the wrong person to walk into it. Listen close. Because in Chicago, not everything that walks into the light is coming from the dark. Sometimes, it brings the dark with it. Our first ride traces back to a place I once trusted. A quiet gas station lot on the south side. The one where my sister worked the graveyard shift. Mari, 20 years old, 5 feet nothing, sharp as broken glass and twice as stubborn. She'd lean on that freezer door, frost collecting on her apron, and laugh like the cold couldn't touch her. I picked her up every morning at 5:30, cigarette in one hand, cheap coffee in the other. It was our ritual, the only stable thing in a month where everything else in my life was falling apart. But December 15th didn't feel right even before I turned off the main road. Chicago has this way of telling you when the night is about to change shape. The air goes too still. The lights hum wrong. Your instincts try to speak before your brain catches up. When I pulled into the lot, someone was already standing in my usual spot. Not a person, a police cruiser, angled under the pump lights like it had skidded to a stop mid-thought. Blue and red strobes flickered across the concrete. Crime scene tape snapped in the wind. It was so quiet I could hear my heartbeat over the vending machine hum. My stomach dropped before anyone said a word. Inside the ambulance, Mari looked small in a way I'd never seen her. Her cheek was swollen, her lips split, bruises like fingerprints blooming across her skin. Her shirt torn at the shoulder, fabric hanging like a wound. I said her name, and she tried to speak, but her voice came out in pieces, like something fragile rolling across a floor. The paramedics lifted her stretcher. The blanket around her smelled like disinfectant and fear. And I kept thinking, if I had been 1 minute earlier, 1 damn minute. The detective let me see the footage. That camera was the kind every late-night store has, gritty, black and white, the kind that makes the world look already halfway dead. In the grain, you could see Mari step into the cooler, reaching for a case of beer. Behind her, a tall guy, lanky, gray hoodie, hands in his pockets like he was standing in line at a movie theater. No warning, no words, just a single, violent hit. She went down so fast my breath caught. He stomped on her, hard, then dragged her behind the counter, shoved her at the till. He took $60, singles and some loose bills. Not even the real cash drop. He left with a handful of money and a shirt soaked in red. 20 minutes later, they had someone in cuffs. A neighbor saw a figure running through a side street, hood up, moving like he knew the dark personally. When cops grabbed him, he was covered in blood. Everyone assumed it was hers. It had to be. The video showed her bleeding. His hoodie was stained by the hem. The story wrote itself. Except it didn't. The detective, tired eyes, smoker's voice, came to the hospital with a folder under his arm. He said one sentence I'll never forget. The blood on his clothes wasn't hers. I froze. It's not his either. The world tilted, like someone had opened a trapdoor under my thoughts. Unknown. Not Mari's, not the suspects. Someone else entirely. He refused to answer questions, refused to look up, just kept pulling his hood low like the world was too bright for him. They convicted him of the assault and robbery. That part was clear. But the extra blood? That belonged to someone else. Someone the cops never found. Someone who bled enough to stain a stranger's clothes before he ever walked into my sister's gas station. And that's the part that keeps me up at night. Mari healed, mostly. She has a scar that catches sunlight like it's remembering something. Her smile changed, not gone, just quieter. She doesn't close the store alone anymore. Always a second person. Always pepper spray in her apron. And me? I started showing up early, sitting in the car with the engine idle, pretending to text, as if timing could protect someone I love. Fear changes the math of your life. It makes minutes feel like armor. The robber went to prison, but the detective's last words still haunt me. Whatever else he did that night, it wasn't in our file. Because sometimes the scariest part isn't the violence you can see. It's the violence you never find the beginning of. And that night, standing under the gas station lights, I realized something I haven't forgotten since. The man who walked into that cooler didn't come from the dark. He brought it with him. The second ride is quieter at first because it feels normal, just me and a hot dog and a radio on low. I was 18 and reckless in the way you are at that age, the kind of stupid that thinks adrenaline is a personality trait. I was 18, alone in my car at a 24-hour place, windows down because the summer air was thick and the hot dog steam fogged the inside of the glass just a little. I had the radio on. I remember the song, embarrassingly. I remember the mustard sweating into the cardboard like a bad decision. Whether I had called an Uber that night or had been planning to, I was in my car, but I'm not sure if I was waiting for a ride share or planning to drive myself. Either way, this could have been a pickup spot. He walked up to my driver's window like he belonged there, hands outstretched, tapping with the soft authority of someone who expects compliance. At first, I thought he wanted to ask for money. Then, he tapped the blade against the glass. A knife. Thin, new, the metal ring of it against the tempered window like an announcement. He put the tip to the glass and dragged it once, twice, slow and deliberate. The sound like a fingernail down a chalkboard. He looked at me with a normal face, like someone who asks directions on the street, but his other hand went inside his jacket. When you watch a movie, you think you'd do something heroic. Real life is quieter. You do the small, sharp math of survival. I kept my hands on the wheel. I was not going to open the door. I made a show of being compliant because sometimes compliance buys seconds. I told him I didn't have the keys out. I told him I was just leaving. While he yanked the handle, I pushed the switch and the window crawled up half an inch. The knife scraped on the glass, fizzed with a sound that will never leave me. He tried to reach in, the blade aimed, finger stretching. I felt my pulse in my throat like a hammer. I reversed, not fast exactly, but decisively. He lunged and tried to grab the car as it moved. I could see him pivot, the hoodie bobbing as he ran after me for a breath, then stopped. He didn't sprint like someone committed to a long chase. He halted, as if rethinking his menu of crimes. Maybe someone had called the cops. Maybe he got spooked by the fluorescent light. The clerk later told me he'd seen the man loitering near the store and had called the police. They took my statement, asked the usual. No capture that night. I remember flipping him off as I pulled away. It was petty and stupid and maybe reckless, but it felt like a tiny human defiance, in a moment that had tried to reduce me to a thing. Later, after the adrenaline leaked away and left a tired crust of nerves, I started to measure new distances. No more late-night hot dog runs in the car alone, windows up unless absolutely necessary, always check the back seat when leaving. Small rules, but rules steady you. I learned how to make decisions with the speed of survival. There's a way adrenaline compresses time. The scrape of the knife on glass seems to last forever, and then it passes. That memory plays when I think about how close normal gets to violent and how a tiny mechanical move, flipping on a switch, pushing a lock, can be the difference between a story and a headline. The third ride is the one that still wakes me up. We were on a road trip, my family and I, packed singed with snacks, a trunk full of blankets, and a map because this was 1992 or 1993 when phones and cars were for rich people and the word GPS meant you'd forgotten to bring your atlas. My father was driving. I was 12. We stopped at a rest area on a stretch of highway that's like a swallowed-out mouth. Bright lights, vending machines humming, the scent of stale coffee and disinfectant. Uber didn't exist yet. Rideshare elements are not applicable here. The ride in this story is the literal family trip, but treat it as one of those rides that could have been a rideshare pickup if it happened today. We pulled up to the pumps while my dad went to fill the tank. My mother and I walked toward the restroom together like two ordinary people on a trip. I was 12, and the world still allowed me to be naive about a lot of things. The bathroom lights flecked. Someone had already used the stall and left, the way the door creaked like a hinge with secrets. I stepped out into a corridor of tile, and the fluorescent flicker felt louder than normal. Then I saw him. He was enormous, in a way that felt unfair to measure when you're a kid. A man in dirty work clothes, massive shoulders, hands like hands you see in tool shed catalogs. He carried my mother over his shoulder. She was folded like a package. He walked with a calmness that made my skin crawl. No shouting, no running, just a steady stride toward a side exit that led to the pumps. He hadn't even bothered to hide her face. He held her like she was luggage. I knew immediately that this was wrong, the same way you know a smoke alarm is a sound you can't ignore. I screamed. My voice was thin, and the sound of it surprised me into a clarity I'd never had before. My father turned like a spring. He charged in a way that men invent in stories, and sometimes manage to pull off for real. The man dropped my mother like a sack, almost like he hadn't expected a fight, and walked away without running. He left through a side exit, and my dad chased after him. I remember the way his shoes slapped the pavement and how my mother's hand found mine and squeezed hard, and the world condensed to the two of us. They found tire tracks around the side of the building, a vehicle idling, the smear of rubber that said someone had a car waiting. The cops came, flashlights making shadows weird, and they interviewed us and took statements. They searched. They called it a grab, a snatch from the bathroom, not even 2 minutes long. The man was gone. We never knew who he was. The police pulled cameras from the highway, called in for tips, asked if anyone had seen a truck or a van idling off the shoulder. Nothing fit. It was as if he had stepped out of the night and then dissolved back into it. My parents made new rules for all of us. No one goes into a restroom alone at rest stops. Never leave someone by themselves near the pumps. Lights on, doors locked. Those rules hung on the wall of our lives for years, a kind of nervous choreography. Years later, when I think back, the phrase keeps looping. The man waiting beside the gas pump wasn't there for gas. He had been standing in plain sight, a silhouette under harsh light, and simultaneously invisible to the cops who only found the tire tracks. It's the worst kind of ordinary danger, the one you pass every day and never see for what it is. All three of these stories land in the same place. Routine is vulnerable. A clerk turning a sign, a kid eating a hot dog, a mother walking into a bathroom. These are things we do without thinking. Yet danger lands not always as a lightning strike, but sometimes as a measured, quiet approach. The people in these stories didn't look for trouble. They stumbled into it by being where people always are, at pumps, in parking lots, at the edge of long drives. There are patterns and there are anomalies. One attacker was arrested. He went through the courts for the robbery and assault. Another vanished into the trees and doubtless wandered on to another lot. The one who carried my mother away for a minute left tire tracks and a hole in our sense of safety. The most disturbing thread runs through that first case, blood that didn't belong. It suggests a man whose night was not a single mistake, but a concatenation of violence, a person passing through other people's harm like a stain that refuses to wash away. You might be tempted to think about blame, or choices, or what people should have done differently. Don't let that be where your mind lands too long. These were smart, careful people who still got hurt. Mari fought back. The night snacker raised his window. My dad charged the man with whatever ferocity fear gives you. Agency matters in these stories. They resisted. They didn't lie down. But they also got lucky in the fragments that saved them. A partial window, a parent nearby, a witness calling the police. Luck and quick thinking are often the thin film between an ordinary headline and a life altered. Practical rules come out of that kind of experience. They aren't magic, but they help buy time and options. Check rideshare driver info before you step outside. Sit in well-lit areas. Keep windows up when you can. If someone is at your window with hostile intent, keep the glass closed and drive away. If you work a late shift, do not close the store alone if you can avoid it. Use staging. Wait for other cars. Ask someone to walk you to your car if you can. These are small investments in future calm. And the strangest, most unsettling detail of all? Sometimes the evidence doesn't fit the story we tell ourselves. A man's shirt soaked in blood that wasn't his victim's. A man who leaves calmly like he's simply stepping out to buy gas. A man who disappears into a highway night with nothing on his record but a pair of tire tracks. The unknowns are what haunt you. They turn a violent act into a riddle. If any of these rides feel familiar, if you've been the person who called an Uber and the pickup looked off, or the one who sat in a car with a music blur and someone tapping glass at the window, tell somebody. Tell your friends, your family, the people behind you in the checkout line. Share as a way of warning and of not letting whatever happened to you become a secret that the night keeps for itself. Before I go, one small practical note. If you were new at the start of this, thank you for listening. If you want to hear more real rides, more ordinary moments that turn dark, subscribe and drop a comment below with your own story. I'll read them. One last thought. We like to think we're safe in the hum of convenience, pumping gas, grabbing a hot dog, stepping into a rest stop bathroom. But danger doesn't care about convenience. The man waiting beside the gas pump wasn't there for gas. Sometimes he was a robber, sometimes a predator, sometimes someone carrying a stranger as a piece of luggage. The common thread is this: the ordinary is where we live, and it's where danger often finds us. The only defense is to be a little less ordinary about our routines. Share your rides in the comments, subscribe for more, and when you wait for your next pickup, look around, not with panic, but with the kind of calm attention that remembers these stories and makes small choices that buy you a different ending.